Talk for a minute about how to give yourself a superpower. I think everybody wants a superpower, and this is a pretty good one to have, and it's available for anybody that wants it. It's easy to do, just super quick to start doing. It doesn't cost very much, and I think that regardless of who you are or where you are in life, if you're not doing this already, it can just super improve your life in ways that you had no idea. It's journaling. So, as silly as it sounds, just writing stuff down, putting it into books, and collecting it and organizing it is just a super way of organizing your thoughts and putting something forward to the future and making plans. And just going to kind of go over a few of the simple ways to get started and some of the really amazing things that you can do to help improve your life with some pretty simple methods. For a beginner method, I think the very first thing a guy should do is, if you got a journal for Christmas or an empty book or whatever, if you've never done it before, you should start a commonplace book. And a commonplace book is just a book. It's you write things down in it, but it's not a diary. You don't put down things that are introspective, and they're not chronological. You just put down, like, if a saying comes across that means something to you, you'd write it down in there. Or if you read something that's interesting, or you hear a good joke, or, maybe there's a poem you like or a song lyrics you like, you write it down and you put it in there, and you just try and make it, like the best book you've ever read. And you'd fill it up with things that you might use in, like if you had to give a speech at a daughter's wedding, or if you were, had to give a speech in front of a bunch of men, things that you'd like to say, or aphorisms you'd like to pass on, or things that even drawings or whatever. It's your book, and you just put stuff in it that means stuff to you that you can draw on later on, and build up the collection over the years. And when you're done, you have quite a collection of things you've put in there, and it's really rewarding and nice to look back through. And you can look back through it through your life and see how you've grown in some areas. You're in good company, because people throughout the ages who've made commonplace books include people like John Milton, John Locke, Isaac Newton, Francis Bacon, H.G. Lovecraft, Ronald Reagan, Robbie Burns. You can even go all the way back to Marcus Aurelius, back during the Roman times, of people who just made up a collection of things that were, meant something to them, and they were never meant to be published. They were just some of their own thoughts and things they found neat and put down in a book, and, kept it, maybe had a reading list in it or whatever. And you just added to it whenever it worked out, and referred to it when you wanted to, and no pressure. So that's a pretty cool place to start, is like with a commonplace book. There are other kinds of books that I personally like to keep, and they are just areas where I'm trying to continually grow and build on the knowledge that I have, and make improvements and be able to refer back to them, and keep them in separate books. Something like, for example, a gardening journal or whatever, where you write down your planting dates and the kind of seeds, and where your crop rotations were, and what varieties you used, and prices of seeds, and where you sourced them from, and the yields and the fertilizer you put in, and all that kind of stuff. And keeping track of, that, frost dates, whatever, watering throughout the years. It really adds to the wealth of knowledge you have, and you can build on that every year to see what worked and what didn't, and what you liked and what you're not going to do again. And it really does add to the value of what you've got in there. Other are like recipe type books. Like, I'm not talking about making cookies, although there's nothing wrong with that. But, for a lot of us guys, we like to, smoke a brisket or make beef jerky or barbecue sauce and stuff like that. And, write those recipes down that we find and improve on them, add more sugar, less salt, maybe a different wood for the smoke. and, you know, something to pass down. How cool would it be to have, you know, Grandpa's old recipe book where he had his beef jerky recipe and his sausage making recipes in there, or, you know, the barbecued pork butt that he used to do, or, you know, things like that. That's in there. That's you know, it becomes almost an heirloom that you can pass along, as well as a personal growth item for yourself. You can make adjustments and pass it along. Other ideas for journaling is like a shop log. A lot of guys work in the shop, and they're you know, you're making plans and figuring out, you know, maybe a bookshelf, how big, how wide, what kind of wood, doing a price list, figuring out, you know, how you're going to break down a piece of plywood most efficiently so that it's going to work out and you're not going to have any waste. And it really adds to the enjoyment of doing it, because while you're, you know, you might be in the house sitting in your chair figuring out what you're going to do, you're getting almost as much enjoyment as you would be if you were out in the shop. And then when you do manage to sneak off from the wife for a few minutes and get out there and fire up the table saw, well, your time out there is spent more efficiently, and, you know, you have your cutting list and you can just whip out a bunch of stuff all the same size, and you have all that information for, you know, the next time if you go to build one, you know what worked and what didn't, and you've got the plans and the drawings, and that's all just really super cool. Some guys, another thing, if you're not doing that, workout habit tracker. You put your workout in there, you know, how far you're jogging, what your measurements are, your weight, your body mass index, how many calories you're taking in, how many reps and how many sets you're doing, and what weight, and keeping track of that. It's a really good way to see, you know, how your workouts are progressing, if things are working. And, you know, when you get to be 50, you can look back and say, you know what, I'm 50 and I ran better than I did back when I was 30, or not so much. But some of these, you know, keeping track of stuff like that, for me, it's a real motivator. Another thing that a person does is, if you're like, I play guitar, not very well, but I play guitar, and I have music log. I keep track of the songs I'm working on, and I have a habit tracker that, you know, every day, if I can get down there for half an hour or an hour or something and plunk away on it, just slowly build on it and try to, you know, get a little bit better all the time. And I keep track of, you know, scales and songs, and you can refer back to see, you know, where you were doing and what you were working on. And, you know, a few years down the road, you can refer to your progress on that. And it's a pretty cool way to keep track of stuff. Another thing that I like to do for journaling is travel logs. Now, I know that right now traveling isn't really a big thing, but even still, for short trips someplace, it can still be of use. Most of the enjoyment you get from traveling, well, not most, half of the enjoyment you get from traveling probably comes from the planning. You decide where you're going to go and where you're going to stay and what you're going to pack. And then you can add to that enjoyment if you have a travel log. You can start putting your information in there, what you're going to do, and then you can research, you know, where you're going to go, and look up the history, look up places around there, find out what the demographics are. Maybe it's a place that speaks a different language. Maybe try and learn some new words and put it in there. And all that time you've spent before the trip preparing for it, you put that info into your travel log, and then when you do go, you've already had, you know, maybe 20 days into your travel log that you've been enjoying of the vacation you haven't even gone on yet. So then you take it with you, and you write down where you go and what you did and what you seen. And for me, I'm not a big picture guy. I like to draw because I'm not very good at drawing, but I find when I do it, I'm just super present. I'll be sitting on the beach and I'll be drawing a terrible picture, but when I'm done, I know how the light was reflecting off of every rock, and I know what every cloud looked like, and I knew what the lighthouse was like, and where the mountains were, and, you know, what the color was coming off the sea or whatever. And it just really puts me, you know, in the place, and I bring that home, and when I look back at the picture, even if it's not really good, it brings all those memories back, just like a picture would. And makes it an interesting read years down the road, or to refer back to, and, you know, extends the value of the vacation that you had, you know, far beyond the, you know, if you were gone for 10 days and you spent 10 days planning, and you look at it, you know, maybe every couple of years after you get back, that's pretty cool. And that just for a simple little book and some time spent, and put yourself in a good headspace. And those are some pretty simple, low commitment ways to start journaling and putting things like that together. When you're ready and you want to move on to superpower, then what you do is you start journaling. And so I started journaling, and probably 6 years ago. My inspiration was my great-grandparents had wrote everything down right from the time they started farming till the time they moved off the farm. And then my grandma, she wrote everything down. So we have journals and journals and journals of everything that happened all the way back, into 1910, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, all the way up till now. And reading back over some of those things, it was just absolutely, amazing to, be able to get to know these people that were gone before I was even old enough to know really who they were. And it's kind of like a one-way conversation. You get to know what their life was like and what they were thinking and what they were doing. And it wasn't so much introspective as it was just, this is what we were doing, and this is when it snowed, and this is, that sort of thing, rather than anybody's how they were feeling or whether they were in love with somebody or something. That wasn't really what it was about. It was about, what was happening. So inspired by that, about 6 years ago, I started just, writing down, every day I would just make an entry. This is what I did. This is what I did. This is what I did. And it was really cool because after the course of a year, you had all these entries, and, you might forget what you did. Say, what did you do 2 weeks ago Thursday? And you're like, I have no idea. But you go back to the journal, you look it up, and they'll say, oh yeah, we went to so-and-so's place and had dinner, and this is where we stopped on the way home. And that might be the only journal entry in there, but it opens a door in your mind. So all of a sudden, the day comes back. You remember, oh yeah, and that was when we did this with the car, and we got the mail, or, if it was important and that thing happened on that day, and you might not have wrote it down, but quite often the memory will be triggered and it'll just come right back. So it's just like you can download all of the information you have in your head into the book, and then when you bring that back, that little whatever you've got in there, I'll just jog it and it'll come back, and you'll have recall of it, a lot of it. And that's pretty useful. So I did that for about 5 years, and it was really super useful. And I thought, well, this is good. And then I started looking up some journaling ideas online, and kind of come across the Ryder Carroll bullet journal method and stuff. And I'm not smart enough to figure that out very good. I kind of ended up doing a little bit of a dumbed down version of it. And what I'd come to realize is just writing down the stuff that I had done in previous days was, as good as it was like a museum full of fossils. Everything in it had already happened and was put away in its nice little glass shelf, and there was nothing to move. It was frozen. And I thought, there's so much more potential here. What if we could take the journal and we would make it so that it was not just the things that had happened, but we could use it as a planner to move forward and to make things more dynamic, so that as we move forward, it could be a tool for growth rather than just recording what we had done. So kind of using Ryder Carroll's method and my own little, way of doing things, I started working on that to try and come up with some ideas that would make that work. And I think that the past year, the journal has become a lot more dynamic in ways of doing things. So I'll try and show some pictures of some things I've done to improve on the way I was doing things, and hope you get some inspiration from it. And I'm excited to start a new year with it, and I hope you got a journal kicking around someplace that you can give her a try, and I'll point out some things that work good and some things that didn't, and we'll see where we go from there. One of the questions you might think to yourself is, why would I want to keep a journal? I mean, it sounds like a pain and whatever, but I think it's pretty safe to say that our lives that we live are a sum of our conscious experiences. So everything that we have lived and we have experienced that we can remember are, you know, the good things that are part of our life. And if you live a day and at the end of the day, it's gone and you don't remember it, I mean, really, what was the point? You need to do stuff and fill it up with experiences and stuff. And even if we have good experiences, most of the time, you know, we forget them. They fade away. So recording them is a way of being able to go back and to grab onto that again and to relive it. And, you know, that's just a really cool, you know, way of looking at it. Another thing is it kind of extends our influence sort of beyond the grave into, you know, our kids or our, you know, our grandchildren, or who knows, way down the line may come across something like this and think that's really cool, or not. But my great-grandparents on my grandmother's side farmed way out in the middle of nowhere, basically. They eked out a living, didn't have a lot of money. There was my great-grandma and my great-grandfather who had lost an arm as a child in a fireworks accident. So, you know, a one-armed man and his wife with 3 kids out trying to make a living farming in the middle of nowhere during the, you know, the Dust Bowl. It was pretty tough. But anyways, so they lived out there. They had 2 girls and a boy, and the 2 girls married off. One was my grandma, and the boy, he was my Uncle Charlie, or great Uncle Charlie. And he stayed home with his folks and, you know, took care of the farm and, you know, took care of his folks. He stayed a bachelor his whole life. And anyways, his folks died, and he continued farming it until he got old, and then he moved into town, and the neighbors that had been renting it from him during his last few years out at the farm had bought the land off him. And yeah, so that's kind of what happened. So my mom's really into family history stuff. So she was always trying to, you know, track down some family history on that side. And she had a heck of a time, because she'd say to Charlie, you know, do you have any old pictures or any old anything? And he's like, no, that it all got destroyed. I don't have any of that stuff. It's, you know, I don't have anything. But when he moved into town, my mom and my dad, they went out there and they helped him move. And this little old farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere, and they popped up and looked in the attic, and here were a couple old steamer trunks up there. And over the course of the years, the house had renovations done to it, and the attic hole had been made smaller while they were working on it. And there's no way these steamer trunks were coming out of that attic. They were just stuck up there. So anyways, they moved Charlie to town, and they told the guy that had bought the place about it. And, you know, Charlie passed away after a few years, and the guy that bought the place decided that the house was old and he was going to knock it down and put up a new one for the hired man to live in. So one day he went over there with a backhoe, and he knocked a hole in the wall just up near the top and sent the hired man in there, and they pulled out these old steamer trunks and put them on the ground, and they phoned mom and dad and said, yeah, we got these steamer trunks out of there. Come get them if you want them. So my mom and dad, they whistled over there and they got these steamer trunks, and to start with, they're pretty disappointed. They opened them up and they were full of mice and you know, some cheap jewelry and some baubles and a lock of maybe my great-grandma's hair, I'm not sure. But at the very bottom, there was a diary that my great-grandma had wrote. And she started it in November of 1949, and it went until December of 1952. And it was pretty, you know, all the stuff that was happening over that period of time. So here was this lady who had died in 1962, you know, that I had never known, and mom really didn't know that well, I don't think, that all of a sudden her life and what she was doing and thinking and what was happening just opened up completely, you know. And now it's 70 years since this diary was written, and we came across it, and it just, you know, she went from somebody that we, you know, was lost to us to somebody that we felt like we, you know in some respect. And I think that's pretty powerful and pretty cool, you know. And She, coincidentally, like when I did a little bit of the math on it, she started the diary about 8 days after my mother, who would have been her second grandchild, was born. So I'm pretty sure she was thinking about the grandchildren when she started the diary, and yeah, it's just a really cool story, and I think that, you know, these books are pretty powerful beyond, you know, what we even know when we're writing them down. And anybody that has a diary that belongs to a, you know, a grandparent or a great grandparent who's since passed knows that how powerful they can be in good ways and in bad ways. So it's a tool that we can use, and, you know, needs to be used carefully, but on the other hand can be really powerful and life-changing depending on how we use it. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this. It's just an example of the journaling I was doing before I switched it up a notch in 2017. I just made the entries and wrote down what we did every day. And really super useful. And at the time I thought that was, you know, really best way to do things. And then at the end of each journal, and this is important, because if you journal long enough, you'll have so many of them, you won't be able to find anything. So at the end of the journals, what I would do is, when the journal was full, is I would just make the year at a glance. I would take the year, and then the highlights of the year I would just write down in quick one sentence blah blahs with the date there. So you could just look through there and find something important, and then you could look through the journal and read about it more in depth as you go along. Otherwise, everything gets lost. Here's 2017, basically the same thing again. And that was the first improvement I made that works really well. I would recommend that at the end of every year, go through your journal and just do a highlights thing. This is an example of how I started the year in January with the newer method of doing things. This is my weekly planner. I would plan my week out, and every day along here that I had a job, I would list my jobs on one side here, and then I would put a dot on the day of the week that I thought I was going to do that. And then as I did the jobs, I would cross them out, or if the job needed to be moved, I would arrow it and move it over and then cross it out when the job happened. I had a habit tracker that I started for the month there, and I put the things on that I wanted to work on for the month and kept track of them throughout the month. And it was just a motivational tool to keep you going and kind of try and keep you on track. And then I had a few things I was trying to memorize, some Spanish words and stuff that I've been practicing a little bit, along with my daily entries. This one's in pencil, and it's pretty simple to do. It looks pretty good, I think, and it's just a simple pencil grid pattern, and that's about the simplest way to do things. When I go a little further on, I started using some color to make it more interesting to look at. It does add to the amount of time, but I think that this there's nothing wrong with just doing things in pencil or the same color ink, and it simplifies it for getting started. And these are really good ways of organizing your week or your month or whatever you're doing. Just another example of my weekly. This is for April. I'd put dots in there and then cross them off or move them around. And if I didn't get it done that week, I would just move it ahead to the next week. Here's a latest example for December. I put my month down all on one side, and then instead of writing down whether it was windy or sunny or cloudy or snowy, I just drew little pictures of the icons. My weekends are in red, and just to add some interest, I started using colored pens. Just makes it nicer to look at, although it's kind of a pain in the neck to dig through your pens all the time. But I just incorporate my habit tracker, and then as my month goes along, I can put down anything I need to in here rather than just having a calendar full of squares, and work that right in with my habit tracker. And that works pretty good, I think. Here's another example of my weekly, and then for my guitar planning, I've been incorporating a lot of stuff into my main journal just to have one book, so that it was just had to go to one place. It was easier to enter stuff and to look stuff up. And this is my habit tracker and calendar for April. Yeah, I just solid block things in this time, just trying out different things all the time to see how things work, and yeah.